Speaking in this last-minute news conference. Let's watch.
President who is pocketing billions of dollars for himself while he drives up prices for the American people. He fears defeat in the midterms, and that explains his spiral into conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories that put Georgia Republicans in a terrible bind. Because now not only do they have to defend this president's economic record, not only do they have to defend doubling health insurance premiums for more than 1 million Georgians, they also have to defend all of these bizarre conspiracy theories coming out of the White House. Finally, all this does is motivate Georgians to vote. All this does is galvanize the determination of Georgia voters to defy these cynical efforts to instill fear and intimidation. Happy to take a few questions.
Senator, Senator, you have said a lot of things about the president, called him corrupt. I believe you said he's acted deranged in the past. Now, if he does come out and call for voter fraud, do you think it's time to invoke the 25th Amendment in your view?
I think it's time for the president to do something of value for the American people instead of lining his own pockets while he's in office.
Senator, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just want to talk about what could be the role of Congress. Like, there's so much speculation that the president this week could announce, whether his investigation, he's directed the Department of Justice to look into the election in Georgia. If he says he's found something and tries to get the Department of Justice to act, what can you or other members of Congress do, if anything?
Look, the abuses of power, the abuses of federal power, the misconduct is unprecedented. That is why Donald Trump so deeply fears his impending losses in these midterm elections, because he recognizes that when there's a change in the balance of power in Washington, there will be real transparency and accountability imposed, and he and those who have enabled him will have to answer for their misconduct.
Senator, have you had any sort of contact by the Department of Justice, by investigators? Has your campaign or anyone associated with you been contacted about any of your elections and asked questions about it as part of an investigation that you're aware of?
Not to my knowledge, no.
And to answer, just to kind of follow up on what Tia said, if they declare your election ineligible, what can you actually do about that to prevent some sort of lack of faith in the system to the voters of Georgia?
Again, just consider for a moment that we understand the president may be threatening to declare sitting United States senators illegitimate. If that is the course of action he pursues, he is calling Georgia voters illegitimate. From the very moment Georgia voters rejected him in 2020, he's been on the warpath because he was humiliated by the rebuke that Georgians dealt him. And he was humiliated and furious in particular as a committed lifelong racist that it was black voters in Georgia who were instrumental in his defeat.
Has the Senate Intelligence Committee seen any information about election interference in the 2020 elections?
I don't comment on Intelligence Committee matters.
Has anyone told you what exactly the president might even be accusing you or Warnock of doing here, or voters of doing?
No. We got time for one more question, guys.
What do you say to your Republican colleagues who may agree with the president on this?
I don't know of Republican colleagues who agree with the president on this. Privately, most elected Republicans in this building think the president has lost it and is dooming them to dismal losses this fall. Thank you all so much for your time.
Mike Collins agrees with them, though. Mike Collins agrees with them that the election was stolen.
Let's see how Mike Collins handles this now. Mike Collins launched his general election campaign doubling down on 2020 election denialism. Now he not only has to defend doubling health insurance premiums for more than 1 million Georgians, he has to defend these conspiracy theories about the 2020 election that Georgia voters have rejected time and time again. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Senator John Ossoff there calling a last-minute news conference to address what could come from the president on Thursday, whether he might try to claim that the two senators out of Georgia are illegitimate, as he tries to claim that the Georgia election was illegitimate because he really wanted to win Georgia. He's saying that if the president does try to do that, what he will be ultimately doing is calling the voters there illegitimate. Greg, I want to start with you on this. What sort of evidence might the president be trying to compile from the state of Georgia if that is, in fact, the direction he's going?
I mean, that's the big question here in Georgia, is that what hasn't been looked at intensely, right? There's been multiple audits, recounts, there's been a federal probes, there's been a years-long election probe, Fulton County DA Fonnie Willis on election interference. This has been, if not the most scrutinized election in state history, at least one of the most scrutinized elections in state history. And we just heard from Senator Ossoff is the same thing he's been telling voters at rallies in Georgia, which are Republicans, are also just as uncomfortable with this. I mean, I just got off the phone earlier today with a key ally of Rick Jackson. He's the Republican nominee for Georgia governor here. He said, do you think Rick wants to spend the rest of the week talking about 2020 rather than affordability? I mean, this is something that could be a real issue for middle-of-the-road voters. You know, the base is going to vote the way the base is for both parties, but the middle-of-the-road voters who decide these elections could be up in the air over this issue.
What about what he said regarding Mike Collins? Let's see how Mike Collins reacts to this, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, Congressman Collins is someone who just a few days ago said Trump won the 2020 election. Congressman Collins is someone who ran a 2022 campaign ad for a U.S. House saying there was a federal hijacking of the election. And so this is one of those, same thing, this is one of those moments where a lot of Republicans who heard that in Georgia cringed and said, oh, you know, not again. Do we have to go back to 2020? He is also looking to sort of clean up that message, saying he's also focused on the future. But he ran on Donald Trump's endorsement. He ran on as a MAGA loyalist. So yet another example of how Georgia cannot escape the shadows of 2020.
You know, what's interesting is Ossoff was not afraid to call Donald Trump very bluntly a lifelong racist and to point out that when he questions results of an election, oftentimes they are linked to districts that are more heavily black or more heavily people of color. That happened in 2020 with Detroit, happened in Philadelphia. It happened in 2016 as well, as Donald Trump was saying, you got to watch carefully what's going on in Philly, watch carefully what's going on in Detroit. Is that a fair link to make, Glenn?
Look, Donald Trump's, we can go to the record here. There's been a lot of biographies written about Donald Trump. Donald Trump's first encounter with the Justice Department was as a kid when he was working for his dad, Fred Trump, and they were defending themselves against a massive discrimination lawsuit and charges that the middle-income housing that they were building in Brooklyn and Queens discriminated systematically against black people. So